Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our NVAR January 2023 Form Changes webinar. I'm Beverly Franklin, Director of Marketing and Communications at MBH Settlement Group. And I would like to remind you that MBH is positioned for your success with our MBH Ultimate Homebuyer Guide. This guide includes a detailed overview of each paragraph of the NVAR sales contract. This helps you set the expectations for your clients and your prospective clients, and it is an excellent tool for you to use when building your business. The MBH Ultimate Homebuyer Guide is available on our website, or you can pick one up from your local MBH office, and this is what it looks like. Additionally, I would like to thank the NVAR Forms Committee, the members of the Attorney Roundtable, and the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors for their hard work in drafting and updating these documents to reflect changes that are needed as our industry changes. I would like to introduce our instructor, Richard Hayden, branch manager of MBH Kingstowne. I'm going to put his contact information into the chat, as well as the summary of the form changes and educational versions of the forms. During this webinar, if you have any questions, please pop them into our Q&A. We will be answering questions at the end of the webinar, and let's get started. I'll hand it over to you, Richard.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is, like Beverly said, my name is Richard Hayden. I'm the branch manager for MBH in the Kingstowne location. So MBH has 20 offices throughout the DC metro area. So I'm in Kingstowne, and I'm grateful everybody joined us today for the summary of the January 23 NVAR forms changes. The good news is that there's no changes to the residential sales contract itself. So it's going to stay at 11 pages. There's been no changes. The changes have come to some of the addenda that attach to that. The financing addenda, all of the financing addenda, and then the property, there's the big change is the post-settlement occupancy agreement. Probably a lot of you have heard about that already. So we're going to spend the bulk of the time going over that. So we expect the seminar to run about 20 minutes, but we're going to take every question and answer that you have. I did peek in at the question and answer, the first one. There was one in the question and answer box. It was about our home buyer's guide, and I'll let Beverly answer that. We will update that with the new changes. I don't know when that guide will come out, and at the end, hopefully Beverly can give us some indication of when the new home buyer's guide will come out. The contract itself will stay the same, but the changes will be, unless you wanted to address that now, Bev.
I can answer that now. So since the contract itself did not change, the homebuyer guides will remain the same, since everything that changed it was not to the actual body of the contract.
Okay. So, and we don't necessarily address all the addenda that go on to the contracts. So, but let's get started. I'm going to go through the changes for the other parts of it, and then I'm going to spend, like I said, the bulk of the time on the post-settlement occupancy agreement, and then we're going to open it up to questions and answers on that. So, and this follows along on the forms changes that we did in coordination with NVAR. So the first thing is a new home sales addendum that was relatively new. That was one of the changes in the last year. That's been updated just to be consistent with the changes in the regular contract that occurred last year in July of 2022. So that was more of a housekeeping thing. So that's the new home sales addendum. Then the three financing addenda, the conventional financing and appraisal contingency, the FHA financing contingency, and the VA financing contingency. Those changes in there, what's been highlighted in there is that the form was revised to clarify that the buyer has to deliver the lender rejection letter for specified financing in order to void the contract. So when the notice goes out to void the contract, attached to that has to be the lender rejection letter. And that's good on the conventional, the FHA, and the VA, like I said. So that's a change. It's not so much a change, it's just a reminder, if you will, because sometimes that rejection letter is not included with the notice to void the contract, and then you have to go back and get it, and it creates a little bit of a headache there. So that, like I said, that's standard for all three. The big change on the VA financing contingency, and this is important for our area here, because now it says that veterans, it used to be that veterans did not have to pay for the termite inspection, or what we now call the wood destroying insect report. It used to be that could not be charged to the veteran, and then any repairs didn't have to be charged, weren't the responsibility of the veteran. That's all changed now. That's kind of standard. The VA has come out with a letter that stated that veterans are not prohibited from being charged for the wood destroying insect report or from paying for the cost of repairs. Okay, so that's a big change, because remember, we would have to move that over to the other side, to the if they were the buyer, we'd have to go over to the seller side. If the veteran is a buyer, they can pay for they can pay if it's agreed to on the contract. Now, of course, you could choose buyer or seller on the contract. And if the veteran or veterans are buyers, they can, if they're chosen to pay for the termite report, the wood destroying insect, then they will be responsible for that. It doesn't have to move to the seller side. I'm dating myself by saying termite report. I can't get used to that wood destroying insect, the WDI. So anyhow, okay, so those are the kind of sort of housekeeping things with the financing addendum, the various financing addendums. But like I said, the big thing is that the veterans are allowed to pay for the wood destroying insect report. Okay, we're going to move on to the property management agreement. That's just added some language in there. And we don't deal a lot with the property management agreement or with the lease, but there's a couple, like I said, housekeeping changes for those. On the property management agreement, there's been language added that agreement automatically terminates upon the sale of the premises. So if you're acting on behalf of or acting as the property manager for a leased property, that agreement that you have with the owner or the seller in this case, obviously, terminates upon the sale of the premises. So that language has been in there. That's added language in there. Okay, now we're going to move over to the lease. So the VRLTA, Virginia Residential Landlord Tenant Act lease. It's removed. So there's been one change on there, and then there's been a form added for this. So that it's revised. The rent paragraph has been reorganized and restructured to promote clarity and to ensure that all relevant information is provided. So, and it added space to list 8 occupants consistent with the rental application. So the rental application allows for 8 occupants. Now the lease allows for 8 occupants. And it revised utilities and services and the fixtures and appliances paragraphs to include language that's consistent with the residential sales contract. So and then it's also revised a move out inspection paragraph to make optional whether the tenant performs move out cleaning services or the landlord is responsible for doing those. And then withholds that cost of the cleaning from the security deposit. So, and what they've done is they've taken the form, there's a move out, there's a new form, it's K, and this is on your forms guide. It's K1396. And it's optional. You don't have to use this form, but it simplifies the move in and move out inspection. So, it does both functions. So they can check it off when they move in and they can check it off when they move out. And you have one consistent form that everybody can work with, and that becomes part of the lease. So that's a good option. And, it helps facilitate things when they're moving out. So you can see what needs to, if any, repairs have to be done. So, okay, so and they've also combined the default and enforcement clauses into one paragraph under the lease. Okay, so on the lease, there's that new language in there under the rent paragraph, and then we have the new form for that. Okay. All right, so those are the kind of the housekeeping things on the other portions of the, the various addenda and agreements that run together with commensurate with the contract. We're going to spend now the next few minutes going over the post-settlement occupancy agreement. There's 9 changes to this, to that, and it's a big revamp of the post-settlement occupancy agreement, which reflects what's been going on in the marketplace over the last 2 years. There's been some important changes. As you know, people have been selling their homes and staying in them for 30 days, 60 days, sometimes 90 days. Because they're selling before they're ready to sell, but because the market was so hot, they wanted to get into that. So Beverly has posted this up here. We're going to go through this, and then, like I said, we're going to open this up to questions after this. So get your questions ready as we go through this. So the first thing is in paragraph number 1, under the occupancy charge. you can see that, well, if you look closely, the PITI has been taken out. So it used to be able to calculate the principal, interest, tax, and insurance as part of the occupancy charge. That's been removed now. So now it's just, blank dollars per day, inclusive of both the settlement date and the occupancy date, or a flat fee in a certain amount. Okay, and then it says on there, buyer and seller agree that the occupancy charge is not rent. So, which brings me to the next point. At the very top of the document, you could see that it says up there that it says, this agreement is not a lease, but a temporary right to use. This agreement is not subject to the Virginia Residential Landlord Tenant Act. So that's an important provision. That's always been part of this, and many of you know that. But we want to make it clear to the buyers and the sellers that this is not a lease. So these are not tenants. So if the sellers hold over, they don't have the protection of being a tenant. They don't have holdover rights or squatter rights, if you will. They can be removed, without going through all the process of like you would for an eviction for a tenant. So they wanted to make that clear. And this is a lot of these changes that came up to the post-settlement occupancy agreement actually comes in off the hotline for NVAR. NVAR gets a lot of questions on almost a daily basis. Many of the questions centered over the last 2 years, year to 2 years, over this agreement. And a lot of these changes are a result of that, trying to answer these questions and clarify these things for you. And like I said, like Beverly said, that you as the realtors are responsible and take part in making changes to the contract itself and into the various addenda to the contracts and agreements. This is a reflection of that. And the attorneys roundtable, of course, assists with that, make sure the language is correct and, fills their need. But you can always, anything that's on here can be changed in the next session if you want to. But this is just to clarify things to make it streamlined. So, hope that's helpful. We appreciate the work, and it's great for everybody to understand this. And we try to make it simple for the buyers and the sellers too. Try not to bog it down in a lot of legalese, just try to get it simple and in an understandable format. Okay, so that's paragraph 1, the occupancy charge. We're going to go to paragraph 2, which is the occupancy deadline. It clarifies that if the seller vacates the property before the deadline, the seller will remain responsible for the maintenance and condition of the premises and the utilities until the deadline, unless agreed in writing. If you agree differently, if the buyer wants to take occupancy, the seller vacates before the deadline and the buyer wants to take occupancy, they can agree to modify that, to modify who's going to be responsible for that. So, there could even be a refund of some of the per diem or the charge that they got on that. So, but that's between the buyers and the sellers. That's free to be modified if they decide to leave early, the seller. But the buyer's under no obligation to honor that. There's no, it would be, like I said, just the between the parties themselves, and it's the buyer's option to do that. Okay, so that's the occupancy deadline. Let's go to the security deposit on paragraph number 3 there. Security deposit. So this one's been moved to the first page due to the importance of this. So it includes stronger language that the parties irrevocably instruct the escrow agent to release the funds to the seller if the list of deficiencies is not received within 3 days. As many of you know, or all of you know, there's that 3-day rule that they have to get that list of deficiencies to the seller in order to get them corrections made or deductions made from the security deposit, for the rent back security deposit. And what needs to be known is, and what needs to be clear is that once that 3 days pass, that's a hard deadline. There's no, unless the parties agree to extend it, I guess they can always agree to extend that 3-day deadline. But it's, absent any extension, which is very rarely happens, there's that 3-day business days. Then those are 3 business days. So basically counting Monday through Friday. I mean, Saturday and Sunday can almost be counted as business days. Many banks are open on those days, but it's 3 business. They have 3 business days to get the list of deficiencies over to the seller. And if they fail to do that, then the seller gets their security deposit back. So I just noticed that the question pop up is 3 days doesn't seem very long, but it's always been 3 days. This is not a change. This is just a a clarification and bringing this to the first page. It's always been a 3-day, to do your walkthrough after the seller's vacate, to do the walkthrough and to present that list of deficiencies to the seller. That's always been the case for 3 days. But like I said, if you want to modify that, if you want to extend that, the parties can do that. I doubt that the seller will go along with that, but depends on which side of the argument you're on. I wouldn't agree to it if I was the seller. I would say you got 3 days to look and see, what if any deficiencies are in the property. So, yeah, and someone else is popping up there about the weekends, whether weekends count as that. I would go with 3 business days right now. It would be Monday through Friday. So if they moved out on a Thursday, I would count Friday, Monday, and Tuesday and get it to them by Tuesday. I would do that. Don't listen to what I said about the Saturday and Sunday part. It's 3 business days. So if they move out on a Thursday, we count Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. They've got to get the list of deficiencies to them by Tuesday. So, okay. All right. Okay, we're going to move over to paragraph number 5, which is the notice. This is new. So this is a new paragraph for the post-settlement occupancy agreement. And when you get a chance, please read this after we're done. It's added the paragraph to clarify that following the settlement, any notices or communications occur between the parties themselves. So it's after the settlement and the post-settlement occupancy agreement is in place. The communication goes between the buyer and the seller, not with the listing agent or the selling agent. Okay, and we're going to see something at the end where there's going to be a box at the end of this 4-page form where the buyers and sellers exchange their information. So I know it's going to be difficult for the listing agent and the buyer's agents. You're not going to abandon your clients. I understand that. But the thing is, once the settlement is done and once closing is consummated, then it moves to between the buyer and the seller on this agreement. You really have no other further obligations to them other than some customer service. So, and you're also probably going to do the walkthrough with them. But like I said, they wanted to clarify that the communication will be between the buyers and the sellers. Okay. And that's like I said, that's a new paragraph. So please read that. So it's paragraph number 5 where it says notice. Okay, we're going to move on to paragraph number 6, property maintenance and condition. So this modified the paragraph in the other form, the earlier format for this, that addresses the question of whether the property must be broom cleaned and trash removed, and if sold as is. Okay, it's included language that the seller must deliver any keys or fobs to the buyer at the deadline. So the seller has to turn over, obviously, all the keys, mailbox keys, any fobs or key cards that they have. So, but, okay. So it modifies that language in there. So it says seller will maintain and repair the property, including electrical, plumbing, existing repairs, and so they'll maintain those items in substantially the same condition as of the settlement date. So that's the marker, is the settlement date. Okay, except as agreed to in paragraph 8 below, which has to do with more insurance claims. Any modifications to the contract through the as-is property condition of the contingency and clauses addendum, seller will deliver the property in substantially the same physical condition as the settlement date. So it's just like the contract language, right? Broom clean, all trash and debris removed, okay, and deliver the keys and the fobs. It's just like if it was closing and there was no post-settlement agreement, it's the same condition of the property as of the settlement date. Okay, so that's been modified a little bit there. Okay, move on to paragraph 7 is the home warranty. Okay, this is a new paragraph. So again, if you get a chance to, review this again, the home warranty. This is something that we've added in to that has been added in by the forms committee. And it emphasizes the importance of a home warranty in the case of replace or repair any, appliances or other, HVAC systems. So that there's coverage. There's coverage to the seller and to the buyer. This includes the seller coverage. So the important thing here is that it's a requirement for seller coverage, which provides continuous coverage from the seller to the buyer, so there's no waiting period or requirement to show proof of working order before attaining coverage. So the thought is, and because we had lengthy rent back periods, the thought was, if you want to do a home warranty that protects the seller while they're in the property from having to replace any appliances that may break down while they're there, because remember, the appliances are in the same condition as of the settlement date. So if there is a breakdown in the washer or dryer, refrigerator, or HVAC, they're going to be responsible for that to get it back to the working condition of the settlement date. So the theory is you may want to just include a home warranty and include seller coverage for the home warranty. Okay, in your contract, in your negotiations. Okay, so just a thought, like I said, especially with these lengthy, these are not like 5-day or 7-day rent backs. We've seen a lot of them 30 and 60 days. And if that trend continues, this may be a good option to protect everybody's interest. Okay, all right, let's go to paragraph 8 is fire, flooding, and casualty damage. So this paragraph has been retitled from what it was before. This used to be called risk of loss and acts of God, casualty loss. So it clarifies that the seller is responsible for maintaining an insurance policy for their personal items, personal property and liability, and the buyer is responsible for maintaining a homeowner's insurance. Okay, so property and casualty insurance, right? So the seller, by moving into this post-settlement occupancy agreement, is only going to be responsible for their personal belongings in the property. They're not going to be responsible for the structure. So if there's damage to the structure, it's going to be on the buyer, because the buyer is going to have insurance, right? The buyer has a loan on the property most likely, and there's going to be coverage for the property for damage to the property. So that's the buyer's responsibility. Seller only has, I hate to use the word renter's insurance. It's like the renter's insurance. It's a much more nominal amount, but that's all that they'll need. And it just kind of cleans it up and clarifies what the buyer is responsible for and what the seller is responsible for. Okay. And then, okay, so we're going to just move on to access, and then we're going to open it up for questions after this. So paragraph 9 is access. Well, we're going to look at the box too at the end. So access, it just modified the paragraph to afford parties the option of negotiating whether the buyer is granted access to show the property during the seller's occupancy. So if the buyer is going to rent the property out, if it's an investment property, can they show the property? If the buyer is going to flip the property, sell the property, can they show the property? So it clarified that 24 hours notice. So you can see it right there on the third line. It says deadline during reasonable hours and upon not less than 24 hours notice. Okay. And that's reasonable notice. And of course, now they can choose whether the buyer or buyer's agent will or will not have the right to show the property to prospective buyers or tenants prior to the deadline, the post-settlement occupancy deadline. So that's been modified. Again, it'd be helpful if everybody could just read this, over Christmas when you have some downtime. You sit in front of the fireplace, maybe with a glass of wine, just pull this out and read it. Maybe before you go to bed, maybe, anyhow. So that's that. Let's go to the last page, Bev, if you would, just to the notice information. So that covers all of the changes to the post-settlement occupancy agreement. And the very last page is page 4 of 4, which is notice information, and is to be completed. And this gives the information. This is the exchange of information, and this is part of the agreement now, the post-settlement occupancy agreement. Like I said, this is page 4 of 4, between the buyer's contact info and the seller's contact info. This and the escrow agent. So if MBH is the escrow agent, you would get our email and phone number, our contact information. And this would allow them to communicate back and forth as far as the property goes. Like I said, they're the primarily responsible for communication, the buyers and sellers, not their agents. Like I said, agents will probably stay focused in on this as they want to continue to give you customer service. You just don't want to drop your clients at the end of the settlement and that's it, and walk away. So, but like I said, they're going to be the ones primarily responsible under the terms of this agreement. Okay, I know that was kind of a fast overview of this. I know there was a significant amount of changes to that. We'll go to questions and answers. We'll open up that box and see what we have here. Okay, gross rent dated June 1st. So one of the questions from Robin is if a ratified contract is dated December 1st and contingencies count, let's say the home inspection is 7 days, you count day ratified as day one? No, so it begins at the next day. So you count, so it's kind of a clock and a calendar kind of thing. So at the beginning, it's a calendar, it starts on the next day, and then it ends at 9 o'clock on the day of the contingency. So if today is December 1st, it ends on December 8th. So 9 p.m. on December 8th. So it's the 8th date. So you're saying if it's the 7th or 8th, it kicks out on the 8th. Okay. Does VA still require a lead test on well inspection? Well, I don't know the answer to that. We don't deal a lot with well and septic on the east side of the county over here. So so again, that's Robin asking that question. We'll look at that. We'll get back to you. We'll get your information and say that. I don't know. I'm assuming that they will. There hasn't been a change to that. There's been no change from the VA in their letter. So I'm sure they're going to do that. I guess the question then is who pays for the inspection, the lead inspection. So they do require it. So we're getting that. Yes, they do. Got that from Mark Ackerman answered there, that they do. VA still requires a lead test on well inspection. So that then the extra question, the veteran pays for that, I think, under the contingency for that, but maybe Mark can come in on that too. So, okay. Then we'll go on to Cindy had a question. At some point, please explain the appraisal contingency plus gap guarantee. I apologize for that. You're right. So added to the financing contingency is the so on the appraisal, on the conventional, well, let's see here. We can get to that. Fine. Plus gap. So on form K1359, which is the appraisal, has to do with the financing and appraisal contingency. On the appraisal contingency plus gap guarantee, that is new. That's something I'm sorry, I kind of glossed over that. That guarantee, so the parties can agree there's a new part in there. So the parties agree that the buyer will pay the difference, if any, between the appraisal and the sales price up to the amount specified in paragraph 4 of the regular contract or otherwise provided in this contingency. So you have on this form, and I don't have it up here, but it's in your forms. It's in it's 57 pages. Don't be overwhelmed. The attachment had the educational version of these forms. There's 57 pages. The post-settlement occupancy are the last 4 pages, pages 54 through 57. And then the financing contingency pages are in the front part of that. So so under the conventional financing, this is just conventional financing and appraisal contingency, right? Because FHA and VA have their own. That's been modified to include this option for appraisal contingency plus gap guarantee. Okay, because we were seeing a lot, obviously, during the market in the beginning of this year, the first 6 months of this year, where the sales prices were way over the appraisal. So who's going to cover that? Are they going to be able to cover that? Is the buyer going to be responsible for that? Will the buyer have the opportunity to walk if they can't, if it doesn't come in on the appraisal, they don't have the cash to cover the difference? So what this does in the appraisal contingency, like I said, it's in your forms. And obviously I would encourage you to read this thoroughly. So the first one is appraisal plus, and then it has buyer gap guarantee is equal to or greater than the sales price. And this contingency is satisfied and removed. Okay. Then it goes on to number 2. Paragraph 2 gives the option of buyer elects to proceed with consummation of the contract without regard to the appraisal, and this contingency is removed. The sellers proceed to the parties proceed to the settlement at the sales price. And then it goes on for appraisal plus gap guarantee. Buyer gap guarantee is equal to or greater than the sales price. And then if buyer elects not to proceed with consummation of the contract because it doesn't satisfy the lender's requirements, or it's less than the sales price, and the buyer elects not to proceed with consummation unless the seller elects to lower the sales price. So you can see there's 4 options on here. that you can go with on this, and it kind of clarifies all the stuff that was kind of being written in on sales addendums to the contract before. Now it's all spelled out here, and you could choose one of these options that works for you as far as that going on. I don't know if that's going to be the case going forward as much, because the market's cooled off a little bit, but it could certainly get back to that at some point. So kind of clarifies that there. Got to take a few more questions here. I know we're running a little bit over what we said we would, but these are good questions. What forms are the buyer using to negotiate writing changes to post occupancy? You could just use a regular addendum, I guess, an addendum to the contract. Just something where they're going to buy. You can, and you would title it changes to the post settlement occupancy agreement. So you would do the addendum and just say these are changes agreed to by the buyer and seller as to the post settlement occupancy agreement, and then sign off on that. That would be probably the easiest way to make any changes to the post occupancy terms. You can, you could probably work it out between communications, but the best thing would be to have some kind of a little written agreement there, so you know what to do. And then we have something, we'll need something in writing. The escrow company, whether it's MBH or any other title company, will need something in writing to see how the money's going to be released, and if there's going to be an adjustment in the per diem, refund of any of the per diem or flat fee that the seller has paid to the buyer. So it'll need to be something in writing. Like I said, you can just go with a blank addendum for right now. Okay, the next question is from one of our anonymous attendees, and it was over 175 attendees today, so we're very grateful for that. If after 60 days post-settlement, when moving out, mold is located behind boxes in the basement, we're blocking the drywall, but never found at settlement walkthrough 60 days prior, seller or buyer responsible to repair. Well, remember, so you're taking the property as is, right? So buyer beware, as is. If they move those boxes and the mold is there, the question is whether it could have been discovered with a reasonable inspection. So you have a question, did you have a home inspection? And, was it checked? Did the mold, if it's after 60 days, obviously the mold's probably been there for some time. I'd say that's something that has to be discussed between the parties. But if you close it, if it's not discovered and it's past your inspection dates, you're taking the property as is. That's the rule of thumb. So whether you can negotiate something with the seller after that, I don't know, but it favors the seller at that point, let's say. Okay. And it says, it's my understanding that this is another question from anonymous. It's my understanding that it has been standard that WDI repairs are always paid by seller if WDI is found. Is this now negotiable? Same question if rhayden is found. Yeah, well, that's in the, yeah, you can negotiate the repairs. So that's the thing that's going on with the VA. So it happens with the other contingencies, with the wood destroying insects. They can pay, the buyer can pay for the repairs. They're not always paid by the seller. They're paid by the buyer. They can be paid by the buyer. That's negotiable as to who's going to pay for that. Different on the VA, I think, in FHA, but on the conventional, I think it's it could be a negotiable item. Then there was one more question that came in on the I thought I saw another question on that. Good. I think that covers all the questions. If there's no other questions, like I said, I certainly appreciate everybody being with us today. And on behalf of MBH, I'll turn it over to Beverly, but I wish everybody a happy holiday and much success in the new year.
Thank you, Richard. For any other questions that might be in the chat, we have your contact information. We will follow up. I did put Richard's information in the chat, and I will place it in there again right now if you have any questions and you would like to reach out to him. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. Also, if you need any of the forms, reach out to us. We're happy to provide the educational versions or the summary if you weren't able to download. Thank you again. Happy holidays, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.